I don't know exactly when the stream starts, so this is like my just gonna like bring it in with some music. Hey everybody, Tony Baccialupo here. We are talking belongfulness, and I'm hanging out with Stefano Sacchi, who is the one of the amazing minds behind Epic Llama, which is bringing all kinds of fun and play into creating connections. So obviously, we need to have a conversation. Stefano, thank you for coming.
Tony, thanks for having me here. I've been following you for some years actually, so it was a gift. It was a huge pleasant surprise when I saw your email inviting me to talk. Honestly, I also admire your work and what you've done in New York, right?
Yeah. I'm, right now, I'm living a little outside of New York, but yeah, I've done most of my stuff there, and um, feelings mutual. It's so
Beautiful.
great to be able to just sit down and get to know a little bit more about what you've been up to. The nature of your work leads to some very enticing photographs of people running around, smiling, having fun, doing crazy things. So, tell us a little bit about who you are. What do you do? What is Epic Llama?
Who am I?
Who,
I'm.
who are you?
Oh man, yeah, good
Welcome
question.
to the Existential Crisis podcast.
You stir up some anxiety in me right now. I was like, wow, yeah. I guess the hat that I'm wearing today is probably this character, this tall man who, with a playful experience designer, a people gatherer who's obsessed with doing things a bit differently and bringing out the kid in people. I think those are the things that I'm. I think those are the things that I am. I'm also very into llamas. Obviously, I have a profound love towards anything and everything llamas, hence the name. Epic Llama. And yeah, Epic Llama designs and hosts really fun, out of the box experiences that inspire creativity, curiosity, and most importantly, foster connection. The the elixir of life. So yeah, we actually. I mean, do you want me to tell you a little bit about how quickly how it started?
Yes, I would love that. That was basically exactly what I was about to ask.
Cool. So we started doing these gamified weekend trips to secret destinations in Europe. Secret destinations, but also kind of unknown, out of the box cities that you would usually not travel to. So the
Mm.
idea is simple. You would show up to the airport. Simple. You would show up to the airport. And your challenge there you would have to find the 7 other people who are holding bananas in their hands, and this would be the symbol of who your travel of the symbol of I guess the Epic Llama adventure. And yeah, you would connect with them. You would have to, once you're all together, you would send a photo. I would send you your boarding passes, and I would appear as a surprise. I would give you like envelopes that you could only open in certain times, like an hour before takeoff, after takeoff. Another one, there was a scavenger hunt that you could open the Saturday at 2 p.m. So these are kind of like just weird and wonderful travel experiences to travel a bit differently, but most importantly to meet people in a very unusual way.
Mm.
I always I always say that, like, if you like put people in like a very kind of in quite an uncomfortable situation, like a good uncomfortable situation, of course, a little bit nerve wracking, like the friendship is more likely to to blossom, let's say, because having these in slightly fun but intense shared experiences like really kind of bring the group together. Um,
Mm.
that was the whole point. Just like, yeah, these gamified travel experiences. Um,
Okay, so take me even a step before that. So, like gamified travel experiences, I imagine that there's like something precipitated you even going that direction.
yeah, it was actually. There was. So I had just graduated. Um, and I went back to my mom's house in Madrid, and I was wondering like where to go. So I was like, I was in between kind of Berlin and Amsterdam. I landed in Berlin, and immediately, like 2 3 weeks once I landed, I created this group. 'Cause I was very into like social experiences and experiments. Sorry, at the time.
Mm.
So I created this group called Breaking Berlin, as in like breaking out of your comfort zone, not
Mm.
being bad fans, which a lot of people thought it was. And the first event, and this was my way of like, hey, like I want to meet new people. I want to do these things. There isn't anything like that. So why don't I just create something to attract the people that I would like to connect with, right? So for me, it was also like a funnel for friendships.
Mhm.
It wasn't a business at all. So I created this. I think it was inspired by this viral video that I saw like a few weeks or months before. It was like this like laughing chain in the metro. I don't know where it was. I think it was in Australia, where a bunch of people just kind of like just created this like laughing reaction kind of thing, and it was very silly, but 30, 40, like 30 people showed up, and we just went into the U-Bahn. The U-Bahn, it's the metro in Berlin, and we just started like playing around with like these, yeah, these like little. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but like it's like when somebody laughs and then somebody else laughs, and then you just prolong this laughter along the whole wagon. It sounds very silly, but it was like it was hilarious. And then we joined like the international pillow fight. So like our meetup group was the one who was hosting that edition in Berlin, and I met some really great people through there. And it was kind of like there when I heard about these like blind bookings that like an airline in Germany did, like Lufthansa, which is you just kind of paid like $100, and immediately after booking you knew where you were going. And I thought like, oh, that was pretty cool, but like how can you take it a step further? Like how can you take this really cool service, which is cool, but and make it a bit more social, but also bring it a bit more extreme, right? Which is like, instead of finding out where you're going after you play, like no, you're literally like 1 hour before the flight, and then you're also with these awesome people that are also joining this boat. So that was kind of the gist of where everything started. It was my need really to my desire to just find, I guess, very crazy, weirdos. Let's say the weirdos that I belong to. Like,
How do people respond when you propose something like this? I mean, you've clearly got, some of your fellow weirdos, but have you had conversations with people where, maybe like a stranger on that train where they weren't expecting to be in a train full of laughing people, and what do people say, or what do you say to people who don't know what the heck is going on?
well, most of the times people aren't curious enough to approach us in the first place. Especially in Berlin, by the way, in Germany. Um, but when they do, yeah, like we tell them, and a lot of the times, I remember we did this like dance walking event, and like a lot of the people asked, and then they just joined us, or we
Mm.
asked people on the street, and like most of the times, though, even if whether they join us or not, like the smiles are just so abundant, and it's so beautiful just to see. Like obviously, there's like some grumpy faces, but like most of them are smiles, and like what is this, and like and obviously they get their phones out and they start recording.
Of course.
But it is very unusual. It's like you wonder if you're in like in the case of like this laughing experiment, like you wonder if like you're in a movie or something, or like if this is like a prank show, because like those things like really don't happen in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah,
um
I imagine people start to wonder, what's the meaning behind this? What's really going on here?
exactly. And a lot of people like joined the group, and yeah, it kept on going for a few months. And yeah, it was a long time ago, to be honest. It's dead now. I actually literally just took it off the map like a week ago, because I'm not in Berlin anymore, and nobody wanted to take it over, so it just disappeared off Meetup. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a time for communities to live and a time for communities to end, and that's part of the process. So now you do this in a more in a professional capacity where you work with people. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of how that works?
Yeah. So a couple of years. I mean, I had a couple of jobs in between. I started working for this company called Chess Boxing. That's actually, yeah, during like the launch. Chess boxing is very interesting, by the way. It's a sport. It's a hybrid sport that mixes chess and boxing, and we used to run these events called like Intellectual Fight Club. So it was during that time that we started setting up these in my head they were called like urban experiences. Like there were city experiences to kind of grow the community in Berlin, like the Epic Llama community. And then in my head it was like, so then it was like they meet us in Berlin, and then they're probably more likely to go on these trips, right? And then that became a thing of its own. So we started Fuck the Small Talk, and we started Playground for Adults. Both events are a bit, I guess, self-descriptive. The Playground is this 3-hour mini summer camp where you just come and get silly and play as if it was like a very long PE class. That's how I describe it. And that was a ton of fun. We did them every 2-3 weeks when the weather allowed it outside. Simultaneously, Fuck the Small Talk started. This was like 6 months pre-COVID, actually. It really started to kick that year, like mid 2019. You know, we started doing them with like on Meetup, paid. So it became more of like more formal. I started reading more about like kind of facilitation and like just event design, and just like it started getting a bit more like professional. And yeah, the events started selling out. Like there were like waiting lists. Like, you know, I was like collecting an enormous amount of feedback, like iterating and like, yeah, getting great feedback, or else we wouldn't have done it, right? People really got a lot out of it. I mean, we can talk about the stories later, but yeah, so I got really excited, and I got really excited as well to, at a later time, like a year after, to grow this a bit beyond me and beyond Berlin. Like a lot of people who came were like, hey, like I love this. Like, so what was interesting is like, you know, allowing others and sharing, giving the tools and the know-how to other people, so they can become, you know, human connection facilitators and bring it to whatever city they're in. And that took a while, to be honest. It wasn't even on my mind. It wasn't even like a thing that was like, yeah, until a friend just like, yeah, just I met up with a friend in London virtually, and she was like, hey, yeah, like, are you interested in expanding like Fuck the Small Talk? And so then she opened the chapter in London. I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, okay, so we can let's diverge, and we'll come back to kind of this core question of how you work with people today.
Yeah.
But first, a couple of diversions. One, can you tell me a little bit about chess boxing? How does that work?
Chess boxing is a hybrid sport that combines chess and boxing. It's 3 minutes of chess, alternating rounds with 3 minutes of boxing, and you win by either checkmate or knockout. Yeah. So, and that was actually a beautiful, like that really inspired me to actually start Epic Llama, because for me it was like combining two things that had nothing to do with each other. It was like, and just making this event series called Intellectual Fight Club that brought a ton of people together. And it was just a lot of fun. There was like, it was very eye-opening for me. It was very eye-opening. It was like, wow, like if this guy can do this, like I can do whatever, you know, like.
So who competed? Did you have people who had experience boxing and experience? Like I'm now picturing like a truly experienced boxer and a truly experienced chess player, who neither of whom are good at the other thing. And a chess player saying, okay, I just got to checkmate this guy before he punches me out. Like, how did that work?
No, well, it was actually people. I mean, there was a chess boxing gym in Berlin, and most people, if not everyone, trained in both sports. Yeah. Chess is a sport. Yeah. Well, yeah, in both activities. So yeah, the Intellectual Fight Club was the amateur chess boxing branch. So it was people who were kind of newbies. Yeah, amateurs, kind of like, you know, maybe they were stronger in chess than in boxing, but yeah, they both had like a fair amount of knowledge in like both sports. And then you had like the professional chess boxing league, which it doesn't happen anymore, but it happened in like Moscow, and I think I don't know if it happened in Mumbai. This is several years ago. Unfortunately, Ipe Rubin, a good friend of mine and the inventor of chess boxing, actually passed away 5 years ago, and with that, well, you know, the sport kind of died down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that with Fuck the Small Talk that you were able to grow it so that other people could run similar programs in other cities, which is something I'm very, very interested in because I think there's a lot of potential for programs to have a greater impact by doing that. So, can you tell us a little bit more about, you had the friend in London. How did that work out for you to turn it into something that could be shared, and what happened next?
I'm still learning a lot, and I haven't nailed it yet. It's been very organic so far.
Mhm.
It's not like fortunately, like it's been through people who I know, people who've been friends of other hosts that they've met in their cities. It's there's not like a system where I have something on my website where it's like, come join the Fuck the Small Talk training. This is what it is. This is what you get. It's not there yet.
Mhm.
But it's something I'm very excited to do. At the moment, yeah, it's been very like right now. 2 days ago, yesterday was the second ever edition, for example, in Vancouver. Um, like 220 people signed up, which is like absolutely ridiculous. And how that happened is beautiful because I met the current Vancouver host. I met them in Medellin, where I was hosting. They came to Medellin and to Mexico City, two separate cities randomly. And then when they moved, they became friends in Medellin, and independently they decided to move to Vancouver. And they're like, hey, like, should we do this together? So they had been already to 3 events. They knew it. They loved it. And then they brought it to Vancouver, right? So it's the stories of the hosts have been mostly like that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's worked very well so far. And yeah, I think with time and with a lot more organization on my side, I'm excited to kind of like launch it in a way where like launch it for the host, right? Where in a way like where it's a lot more organized and like streamlined and like, hey, this is these are the little videos and the tutorials, and there's like a wiki how, and there's like a community of hosts as well. But that's how it's been so far.
Amazing. Yeah, one of the things that I'm very interested in is I'm seeing, so there's kind of this larger conversation about people finding belonging and loneliness and meaningful connection. There's a lot of folks who are just struggling to find that connection in their world. And at the same time, there are all these amazing stories of people working on really cool things like you and what you're describing here. And what I find really interesting, because I've seen this happen in the co-working movement and with some of the programs that I've been a part of, is that they can be scaled up. That we have a kind of an open source society where you can you can document the playbook for the thing that you did well, and then somebody else in another city might not have the original idea, but they have the willingness to organize that idea in their city. And that's not a hard thing for a lot of people to do, is to take a playbook and run with it. And so I'm just very curious about what the potential is of being able to do more things like that.
I'm very curious about that as well, and excited about it. I have to admit that I don't document a lot, and I don't share, but not because I don't want to. It's just because like I have just like I don't know, a strange relationship with social media, and I don't know. I don't even know if I'm good at like teaching or,
Mm.
but I do love video making, and I do love documenting actually. Like I love kind of like talking to people and saying, hey, like when I get super excited when a new host comes, and like I dedicate so much time with them one to one, and I give them a lot of resources. But I haven't really thought about like kind of making it public. Um,
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I appreciate I appreciate people, like I know I follow some people like the party scientists. I don't know if you know him, like Jack or
Hmm.
Jean Peck. They're incredible. Like they share so many great resources on how to connect people, and like I've joined their events and I've paid for their workshops, and yeah, I haven't gone around to doing it myself.
Well, maybe it's something we could discuss more at some point, because I'd love to,
Yeah.
have that conversation and support you in whatever way I can.
Thanks, Tony.
So, in terms of, so other people, and just creating a sense of curiosity and connection. Like what do you think it takes if I want to do that in my own world? Like what would I need to do in order to like realistically create that kind of experience for myself?
You mean you mean create it or host it?
Yeah, like as a host of something something creative and original, like what you do for your
I see.
work.
I see. I
Like
see.
I would say maybe let's start with that. Like from your professional standpoint, if you work with somebody to create an experience, where do you begin? How do you start shaping that conversation?
Well, yeah. Hmm. So I would say, like, if somebody had an idea of a gathering or an experience, like whether it's connection based or create, like, or anything, like, I think eh, the best thing anyone should do is, like, I mean, literally just go on meetup.com, like, start something and do, like, the smallest version possible, or do a little experiment with your friends and family. Like, fuck the
Mm,
small talks didn't start. Uh, um, it started just like a gathering on Meetup where, like, it was called meet and greet, and, like, I literally had, like, these questions, like, and I was just, like, changing every time, like, but I was experimenting, like, it's just kind of like, for me, it's like, come up with a cool name, like, come up with some catchy copy, and, like, and just show up and be, like, consistent about it, and also be, like, fun and dare to be, like, originals, because, like, even the name "fuck the small talk," like, I was at the beginning, I was very, like, I was a little bit hesitant because it was, like, a bit too, maybe, well, it's obviously vulgar, but it's intense, and it now I don't even, I can't even think of a name that's not "fuck the small talk," and people really identify it because it's such a strong kind of, it's like a thing people say,
yeah.
it's like, "Oh, fuck the small talk." It's like a, so people really identify with it. So, yeah, I guess, like, if in the simplest of terms, like, just literally launch a Facebook event and, like, gather your 10 closest friends and just, like, experiment with whatever type of gathering you want to do.
Yeah, it's amazing how much something successful tends to start with just
Yeah,
invite a few friends and experiment with it and see where you go from there.
yeah, yeah. We're all it's hard not to, it's hard to abandon, like, this the perfectionist mindset, right? It's like, no, it has to be perfect before it launches. Like, your friends don't care if it's perfect, and most people don't
Yeah.
even. Well,
Yeah, and you've also got the advantage of just low stakes in the beginning. If you're just trying something, nobody's expecting something to be perfect. They're just experimenting alongside you and you're all kind of exploring and learning together.
yeah, exactly. And especially if it's, like, free, if it's like any free event, is like, the expectations are always usually pretty low, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's a whole other conversation, by the way. That's also, like, the free meetups that I went to in Berlin were also one of the reasons of my frustration, and then starting "fuck the small talk," because, like, yeah, it's free, but it's not organized, and because it's free, the host doesn't give the attention that a gathering deserves,
Mm.
and they were all very mediocre gatherings, like, so that was one of the reasons as well that that "fuck the small talk" started. Like, I love when somebody introduces people, when there's facilitation, when there's, like, a host. I think
Mm.
hosting is so important for most gatherings.
So tell me more about that because I'm very, very interested in that as a subject. What is the difference between somebody who's just kind of running an event versus someone who's really actively hosting and facilitating?
So, I'm sure you. So in Berlin, there was this meetup. It's probably still ongoing. Like, it's called, whatever. Like, even the title, like, make new friends in this bar. I mean, how many times have we all experienced that? We go to a meetup. There's a table. Maybe there's a sign written. Maybe there isn't. By the way, so then it's the
Yeah.
awkward moment of, like, hey, is this? How many times has everyone asked this question? Like, hey, are you from the meetup? Like, first of all, that's already very awkward for some people. Like,
Yeah.
like, a lot of introverted people, like, they hate that. Like, I'm okay with that, but, like, most people, that interaction is already awkward. And then you talk, and then maybe you sit down, and there's someone next to you who you talk to the first 30 minutes, but then you're kind of done with that conversation, but you're too shy or nervous to kind of stand somewhere else or go to somewhere else, and then you're there for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, until you get bored, or you maybe really click with someone, but maybe it's just one person, and then the host is not a host. The host is just sitting there on the table, maybe saying, "Hey, like, hey, this is the meetup." There's no. I'm obsessed with like form. I'm maybe a bit too formal in that regard, but I love it when I go somewhere and there's a host and there's like a gathering and I can see everyone's faces and like, hey, we are here for this, this, and this. These are the things that we're going to be doing. These are the times. These are how. This is when it ends. This is when it finishes. This is what's going to happen after. Like all those things are beautiful little facilitation tricks and hosting tricks that can really, really make any gathering from like mediocre to a bit on the to wonderful, from boring to brilliant. And I'm very passionate about that, and I really encourage anyone always, even like friends who host dinners, like get name tags. Like there's so many little things that you can do to really make gatherings like not boring. And people appreciate it so much. Like it's crazy.
It's true. And I think it makes the job of the people who want to facilitate great gatherings harder, because I think one of the issues that we saw even prior to the pandemic was that people would go to those kinds of events that you described, not have a great experience.
Yeah.
And then the next time they get invited to something, they might say, what's the point? I'm just going to stay home. And then we have a problem, because then people aren't even bothering to try.
That's exactly it. Yeah, they're judging it by their first experience. And that's the feedback that I get so many times. Like it's literally like, oh wow, this meetup looks very different to all the other meetups. I get that pre-event and also before. And in my head, it's just it's a different category of like meetups. It's just a different category. Like the minute you add, it's also paid, of course, right? Most meetups are free. Of course, if you think about it, like especially the networking meetups, of course there are some paid ones, but most of them are free. So it's like, this is like, oh, I've never seen any of this. People I feel like there's also an issue of like hosts being scared to charge. I mean, artists in general, right? I mean, I consider I consider myself an artist as well. Just like especially when you get started, like. But there's so much, if you put effort into like hosting and organizing and designing in the space, like you should absolutely be paid for your efforts. I think there's no like, obviously if people maybe having different tiers and being maybe inclusive for the people who having student tickets or low income tickets, like of course, but you should absolutely get paid like for your efforts.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a whole other kind of conversation. Is there seems to be this dichotomy of there are some people who don't have any trouble charging, but maybe aren't the best facilitators, and there are some people who are really great facilitators but don't have that mentality of treating it like a professional endeavor. And the magic is when you can kind of strike that difference, strike that balance with both.
Yeah, because paying for an unsatisfying event with mediocre facilitation is very frustrating. Very.
Yeah, and again, it makes people less likely to want to go to the next thing that might be really great.
Yeah.
Have you found that there is actually, let's talk a little bit about kind of the team building and those kinds of things that you're doing with Epic Llama. What kinds of stuff do you do with your team building? How does that work?
So most of our team buildings involve an onion.
I saw this word come up multiple times on your site.
So let me backtrack. Pandemic hits. We're in the like fuck the small talk is like all time like going hard. Like it's like the events are just incredible. Like we're like people are signing up. pandemic hits, we started doing them online. It took me a couple months. Great feedback as well. We use this software called, I think it's now called Gather Round and Zoom.
Mm.
At the same time, my friend was he's part of this community which is kind of dead now, called Professional Weirdos, mostly based in the UK. I say, hey man, like why don't we organize like a little networking event for the professional weirdos? It was like people who do business kind of differently, right?
Mm.
So we thought about this name and this networking event called the Onion Hour. And yeah, long story short, the Onion Hour became this like monthly networking event for creatives, especially for the Professional Weirdos group. And then we started doing them for corporates. Some people started approaching me, from people who had attended on Fuck the Small Talk events, also people who had attended the networking events. Yeah, they were like, hey, can you do this? So the Onion Hour transformed into this kind of onion themed immersive adventure on Zoom, where we peel through the layers one by one, but every layer is a planet, and every planet is a game that we're all, on board, that we're all taking part in. Some people will be left behind. Some people will make it to the core of the onion. I'm kidding. Nobody ever gets left behind. And yeah, it became a very original and quirky, like, virtual team building event. And I dare to say, not cringy at all, which I feel like at the time, still now, right? A lot of online events, especially team building events, are like a little bit like, oh, even like you say it, people think about it. It's like, oh, there's like a little bit of cringe in there,
Yeah.
Like.
Oh yeah.
So we like, yeah, we really, and when I'm hosting, and when I'm hosting with my co-host as well, like we literally talk to teams as if we were like, as if like they were like our best friends, like jokes are everywhere, and we do it very slowly in a way where people open up, right? Kind of levels, we warm up, and then people get really into it. And yeah, we started doing that thanks to the pandemic, due to the pandemic. And we started doing a couple of other like things online, like virtual kickoffs. We did like this like week-long event for this. It wasn't all onion themed, of course, but they wanted us to kind of design the theme, and like we hired other people to kind of do other experiences like in between the sessions, and all in the name of play, of course. Everything we ever do, any experience will always be very playful. Even Fuck the Small Talk, right? People think it's like, oh, it doesn't sound playful. If you think about it, it doesn't sound playful, but when you see the branding and the copy, right? Copy super important. I think that when you read that, it says, oh wow, this is actually, it does sound playful and like very kind of down to earth is a word that I hear a lot. Or like, yeah, like this sounds cool. Like as if I was talking to you and saying, hey, like I'm organizing this cool thing. It's like it doesn't sound very formal,
Mm-hmm. I love that. So, what kinds of folks do you work with? What kinds of teams do you team build with?
The most of the companies were startups from Berlin. So small, we've done, like teams of like 30, 40. We've done some, I think the biggest one was like this, what was that? Yeah, 100, like 100, 200 person team. We did this really cool, we designed a remote scavenger hunt we designed it remotely and hosted it remotely, but it was taking place in person out in the outskirts of Berlin. There was like this team of 30 people who were doing an in-person retreat. But we designed this whole like story around this scavenger hunt. We sent them like the videos. There was like WhatsApp channels. I coordinated with someone in Berlin to like give them these envelopes. And it was being like in real time. They would send us like the challenges, and I would see them. And then I made this like recap video that like in the time of their break, like, and then there was this character who like was the master of the hunt, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. That was like the only and first, that was the first and only time we've done that so far. That was a really cool. It was like this climate organization. Yeah, most of the teams are quite young. I'd say we did an event last year for Google Cloud, and they were the first. It was a small team, like 20 people. They were like, I was a bit nervous because they were like more seniors, you know, and then we've never done anything like with like a senior team with the senior team, and they loved it, and we didn't even do it on Google Meet, so I was even more nervous. Yeah, I was like, but I think those are the people who like didn't expect it and probably, I don't know, maybe even needed the most. Like, I guess yeah, that was a ton of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you've gotten, I'm sure, some feedback on that in terms of, the experience for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, no, they loved it. I loved it. That was actually the second time. So that says a lot. And then last year we did this very weird Nicolas Cage themed event where we literally designed a space. There was like Nicolas Cage statues. It was related. We call it like the meme verse. And it was this, yeah, very crazy team building event. We used Gather. I don't know if you're familiar with Gather Town, not Gather Round,
Yeah.
which I mentioned before. This is Gather Town, yeah.
Tell us about Gather Town.
I've only used it a handful of times, like a couple of times to be honest. It was the only team building event that we designed actually on GatherTown, but it's so cool. It's like it's a video game, you know. You're there and there's like secret rooms and you can design different objects, and you can design for interaction, right? Like, hey, click X, this shows up, it gives you a riddle, and the answer to that riddle will is the access code to this other door, which in space, which takes you to God knows where. So there's a lot of little things you can do there. Teams can form, which is cool. Like, kind of like in real life, like, you know, okay, you have to find a team of 4 people, like blah blah blah, you know, and it's a little bit chaotic, of course, and you have very little control as a virtual facilitator in Gather Town. It's quite complicated to gather people, surprisingly. But ton of fun, ton of fun designing on there. Very, very unusual.
Yeah, Gather Town is wild. I mean, so for anybody who hasn't tried it before, as you said, it's kind of like a Zelda video game
Yeah,
from like Super Nintendo era, like kind of pixelated, and you have a little character that walks around, little avatar, and you can interact with other people who are also walking around in this space. And that's, you could design this physical environment and how people interact and create
yeah,
these secrets. And it's kind of a fun way to create a sense of place. We saw a lot of these startups emerge during COVID, where we just had to deal with the fact that we couldn't physically be in the same place together. And it was interesting seeing these experiments in creating a sense of place, which, having done some events in GatherTown and another platform, a similar one called Topia,
great.
I found that you can create some sense of kind of an environment that people can be hanging out in together. Uh, it's not at all the same as real life, but it is interesting, and it maybe does give people a sense of, maybe creating a sense of wonder, a
Yeah,
sense of, I'm doing something a little bit different, and it's getting me thinking a little differently. And one of the things I like about those platforms too, some of them, is that you can kind of interact with them successfully with your camera on or off,
that's true.
which I think is useful, that everybody can kind of decide how they want to engage. They can physically decide with their character where they want to go. So if they want to be part of the main event going on in the big room, they can walk over there, but if they don't, they could just walk out, go to a different place.
I
So
love that
there's
about, yeah.
some sense of choice that you don't have that in a Zoom meeting,
Mm.
right? Where everybody's there, and you might have breakout rooms, but it's basically one big wall of faces.
Yeah, it's a lot more awkward to be on Zoom without a camera than on. Well, they introduced avatars on Zoom recently, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to see
It's
them. Definitely want to see them go further there, because I
same.
think that will help from an accessibility and
Mhm.
safety standpoint. But yeah, I think there's kind of this feeling of, I always tell people up front, and this was something I did during when I was kind of experimenting with things during the early pandemic, before we all just kind of forsook Zoom forever for facilitation. But when we were getting started, I would say, hey, interact however works best for you. If you want your camera on, I love to see your beautiful faces, but if you need your camera off for any reason, it's okay. That, that's welcome here. But I also felt like I had to say that so that people did not feel like they had to
Mm.
have their camera on. And I think, the assumption otherwise is, that our camera should be on, or otherwise, what are you hiding?
Yeah, I've been in some very awkward couple of events where I was not expecting so many people to not turn their camera on for an event that's about like play and like meeting your team members. I was very shocked, to be honest. Like that was, yeah.
I've been on the other side of it too, where I've been in events where I'm, for one reason or another, just kind of barely able to even participate. Maybe because I'm in a shared space with my wife and she's working, or we've got other stuff going on, and like I can sit in on a meeting, but I can't really talk. And then I've had times where I'm sitting in on something, I'm listening, and then they say, okay, it's time to go into breakout rooms. And I'm like,
Oh yeah,
exit.
yeah. Run.
Run away.
There has to be a meme of that. Like that's such a like.
Yeah. Because I feel bad because I don't want
Yeah.
to be in an awkward situation, but I don't want to create a bad experience for the other person and for the facilitator. I've been in that position where I'm creating breakout rooms, and then inevitably somebody ends up in a room by themselves, and then I have to deal with that. And so, I know when I hear the organizer say like, okay, it's time for breakout rooms, I picture in my head that they're like assigning the rooms or they're setting up the pairings. And I'm like, I got to get out of here before I mess up the rhythm of this program. But then I'm back to square one.
That's hilarious. The worst part is then when you forget to like exit before you put in, and like, oh, you're already in there, and like, what do? Like, do you
Yep.
like act as if like there was a bug on Zoom and you just
Oh my God. Exactly.
yeah.
But we've got options now. We can do things on. So you do activities online in addition to in person, yes?
Yeah. It's been kind of slow, to be honest, these months. I haven't been also like focusing too much on the online company events. What has been growing, to be honest, what I'm personally more excited about is growing fuck the small talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Although financially, of course, it's less interesting than working with corporates. But from my own, from a passion point of view, it's definitely what excites me the most. And yeah, seeing now Vancouver, which is very new, and we're finding a new host in London as well, and I've actually been working in my head, and there's already the wiki, and like kind of doing these like cohorts, like with 2 or 3 people max, of like if people who are interested in bringing each of their own city, and having this very
Mm.
very mini kind of 2-3 day, like spread out, of course, like mini 2-day trainings, where we give we give the people the tools, and like, and we 2 or 3 cities will do it at the same time simultaneously, so they can kind of talk amongst each other as well. It's like you're doing it in, I don't know, Austin or yeah. So that's kind of been on the top of my mind right now. Haven't been doing too many online events.
I think it's an awesome idea, though, to go to a cohort model when scaling up to other cities, things like that,
Yeah.
because as you've said, you've got people who can compare notes who are at the exact same stage of their development.
Yeah.
So they're not on their own, and they're not completely depending on you to provide them all the answers as well, which I think is also
Yep.
very important.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited about it. It's still very. I mean, there's nothing out there yet, but it's definitely something that's going to happen relatively soon.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, is one of the areas I'm very interested in. So I'll definitely be in touch with you if there's a resource I create or anything that I can do around that. Maybe we can have a cohort of people who want to grow their cohorts.
Yeah.
We'll go from there.
I I love that, actually. Yeah. Yeah,
So, as we get into just the last few minutes here, I had asked you prior to us meeting to share with us either a book or a link, something that has been just amazing for you lately. And you sent me a link to a Substack. Can you tell me about it?
yeah. Um, I found this guy the other day, and I just like instantaneously fell in love with his copy, with his like mission to live life more adventurously. With my life slogan is like making born brilliant, and I feel like this guy is kind of like exactly on my same page, and I guess his value, we share very similar values, and I want to share. It's just this very this somewhat, you think it's kind of complicated, but not really. This sentence that I really related with.
Hmm.
It's specifically on this article called "Little Book, Big Impact." It's about a book called "A Short Stay in Hell." But yes, which is surprisingly something that, yeah, I haven't read it yet, but in the uh, in the article, it was, he says that it I'm not describing this well, but it did the opposite of what you think the book should do. And I just want to share this little sentence. And he says, "What you do with this city life?" And he says, my approach to my short stay in not hell." He says, "This little story and the ultimately meaningless nonsense I've studied and written about over the years click together into one satisfying choice." And he says, "I'm committing to living a one of a kind story about having the unselfishly best time I can, fighting complacency and delusion to pump my life full of anti regrets." I had to read that a couple of times, and I was like, wow. I was like, I'll, I'll just leave it at that. Like, yeah, but definitely check out this guy. I think it's incredibly inspiring how he writes, how he lives, and just in a way, it's just nice. You know what's beautiful about him and about people, just people like him. It's just people who live life differently, who do life differently. You know, and that for me is like the most beautiful thing. It's like, you're going against the tide, or not necessarily against it. Yeah, you are, because like most people, I mean, most people go, they don't question things. So yeah, it's just like when you see someone doing things so different, it's like, wow, I want to live life like that. Yeah.
Heck yeah. It's amazing how much we respond to just seeing people doing things differently. I feel like that really, I guess it's part of our nature that we imitate, we have like that kind of monkey mentality of like we monkey see monkey do, we
Yeah.
imitate people we see, and it's hard for us to visualize living differently from what we're used to, but it's a lot easier if we see somebody already doing it.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. Like there's this thing of like, I saw this post once. It was like, shine your I'm gonna butcher it, but like shine your weirdo light, whatever, so you can attract the other weirdos. It's like if you don't shine your light, however unusual it is, it's unlikely that you'll find the other people will also
Yeah.
shine as bright as you, as weird as you, you know? And it's true, like
Yes.
the times where I've put myself out there, and I rarely do. It's surprisingly, like I on social media I still have this thing, like, but the times that I do put myself out there is the times where I literally get invitations like this one. I meet people. People write to me, "Hey, I want to do this in my city." Hey, you know what I mean? It's like if you have something cool, it's like almost like I'm talking to myself as well as any other creative person who's reserved, who's a bit more reserved with sharing. It's like, for me, it's almost like a duty. It's like a duty
Mm.
to humanity, to creativity. It's like a service that we need to do to inspire others. It's not about you. Like get over yourself, because like other people are waiting for that light, and maybe if they don't find you, they'll never create it. And this is like a whole loop, right? That's for me. That's how creativity works.
Yes, and that I think that last bit of, people are waiting for you to shine your light, and if they don't see it, then they might not create their own. It's such a compelling case for what it is that we're looking to do here, is
Yeah.
to try things. And I know an amazing woman named Amy Van Doren, who is a matchmaker, who has this bright orange hair. She's got this just very iconically, like, just neon glow in the dark orange hair. And we talked about it, and she talked about how it's a very deliberate choice for her to have this look, and that it disarms people, that people feel like just strangers on the street can just talk to her. And she's ended up making business relationships, romantic relationships, like all of these adventures that have happened directly as a result of her making herself visibly different and putting that kind of image out there and attracting the like-minded weirdos, so to speak.
I
It's
love that.
a beautiful thing.
That's a great hack.
So, so if anybody's got a orange wig hanging in their closet, now's the time to dust it off. Stefano, as we get to the end here, I want to hear your thoughts on tortilla española.
Oh, my mouth just started watering right now. Like, it's honestly one of the simplest and most delicious dishes that I have in my recipe book, and my recipe book is very little. It's such a beautiful dish. It's a Spanish omelet. You cut those potatoes thin. You fry them with onion, of course. There's like a whole debate in Spain, like onion, no onion. No, it's onion. Like, it's not a debate.
Okay. Yeah.
Get that onion in there. Once you have that kind of not crispy, kind of like brown, you mix it with like 6 or 7 eggs. You make it into this mush, and then you put it back on the pan, and that's it. The hardest part is flipping it. You have to flip that, obviously. Flip it, and it's big, it's thickish, it's like this, So flipping that, you need like a plate, you need a technique. That's the hardest part, because that can easily slip. If it slips, you have an omelet. You have a scrambled omelet. You don't have a. Then once you flip it, again, 2-3 minutes on each side, and that's it. It's beautiful. Like, they're so round, and if you want to, like, every time I have any type of reunion or gathering, I always take that Spanish omelet, and it looks good, and it's honestly so affordable, because it's just eggs and potatoes, but it'll make you look so good. It's such a nice food hack. Like,
love it.
Yeah. Have you tried it, Tony?
Oh yeah, I've tried it. I haven't made it, so maybe your recipe will help with that.
Yeah, many people don't dare. It's like, because it's in their head. It's like, no. It's like, why would I make this? This is something that the Spanish eat, and that I only eat when I'm in Spain. But it's like so easy. It's like one of those things where I'm like, wow, why haven't I been doing this before? Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Stefano, finally, where do we find you on the internet?
Well, you can follow my llama adventures on epic.llama on Instagram, at epic.llama, and epicllama.com with 2 L's. My own personal one is Astro as in, Astro S, and then Sacchi, Sacchi. That's not as easy spelled out. But yeah, feel free to find my name and connect me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, if you have any question or any concern as well.
That's right. Go to Stefano for your concerns, everyone. Doesn't matter if he has anything to do with it.
Exactly. If you want to bring fuck the small talk to your city, and you have some spare time, and you're excited about it, most importantly, that's the most important thing. If you're excited about it, send me a message, because I'd love to make that happen.
Amazing. Stefano Sacchi, thank you so much for your time. It's great to chat with you, sir.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks a bunch.
All right.